All right. All right, on your desk. How's everybody doing, first of all? It's good to see you. I'm doing well. On your desk, this is what I need to have out. I need your vocabulary words out. Julia, I need your vocabulary words out. I need out your essay, the Edward Said essay. I need your homework from last night. And I need your notes. Where you take notes. We're going to be taking notes for the first portion of the period. For the people who weren't here yesterday, we had some sickness going through. Welcome back. All right. The verb we're going to work on today is Sabrina? Synthesis, or we're going to synthesize. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise. We know that we're wrapping up multiple texts, multiple pieces of fiction over the course of the semester, and we're going to be connecting it to what? We're going to be connecting it to Edward Said's essay, right? The nonfiction piece. So listen, let's look at the definition. Synthesis means combination of parts into a whole. Okay, so today, our goal is this, to think back on our pieces of fiction, think about, paraphrase, understand Edward Said's point of view in his essay, and bring all of them together. That's our goal for over the course of the period. We're going to take Edward Said's ideas and attempt to see those ideas at play within the literature we've studied. Any questions on that? Your homework is up here. Shouldn't be any surprises. The study guide is on Edline. If you have any questions about this, you can see me after class, but we've known this for a little while. Okay? Where we're going to start the period is where we started the period yesterday. We're going to start with this image. We're going to start with the image that you guys had of the young Syrian boy in the refugee camp. Does everybody recall? Okay. With your vocabulary words in front of you, can somebody go ahead and use some to review what we said yesterday about the condition of this boy from the Syrian refugee camp? What are some words that you would use to characterize his situation? Go ahead, Vikram.
Alienated.
Speak up a little bit.
Alienated.
Alienated, which means?
Alone.
Alone. What's another word that you might use?
He's dislocated.
What does it mean?
It means that he's not with the rest of something. He's disconnected.
Okay, disconnected. Because he's no longer in Syria, right?
Yeah.
He's in a camp. Okay, good. Dislocated. Away from home. Michaela?
Independent.
We talked about the idea of independent. Nicole, what did we say about the idea of independent?
That it has a positive connotation.
Okay. What might, Michaela, knowing that independence has a positive connotation, and we were to look at this image, do you see a positive connotation of his situation within the refugee camp?
No.
What might be a better word to use to characterize his situation?
Individualism, maybe.
Okay, individualism.
But that one also is kind of like positive.
It is kind of positive. Sabrina?
Estrangement.
Estrangement? Or maybe, since I think the idea is you're saying because there's no one else around him, what about isolated?
Yeah.
Isolated? Might that work?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other ideas? Any other words that you would use? Go ahead.
Discontinuous.
Discontinuous. What does that mean?
Like broken.
Okay, broken. Okay. Yeah.
Rift.
Rift. How so? How does the word rift apply to this?
Because it's like an open, I guess, but it's like cracked. He's like, I don't know, he's like split from society or something.
Split from society? Where do we see the potential rift? Where do we see the rift here? Go, Michaela.
Because he's walked away from like the tents in the refugee camp, so
Okay.
he's separated from them.
Okay. Go ahead, Nicole.
And that can parallel that he's separated from society, I guess, because the way he's separated from what is his home right now, he separated that in the same way from society or from what should be.
Okay, very good. Justin?
If you look in the background of the picture, it looks like there might be like buildings or something back there. So maybe like all the long distance between like the refugee camp and that is the rift.
So that So the distance between him and the horizon is the rift, a representation of the rift. Okay, very good. Jake?
I was going to say, yes, you know, the city in the background, you can see that large sprawl of land is representative of the rift between him and society.
Okay, very good. All very thoughtful ideas. Now, listen, what do you think about this image? If we were to put the two side by side, how is this image different? What are some vocabulary terms that you might use to characterize this image? Go ahead, Dominic.
This one seems more like he is independent because he seems more upbeat. Cause like the color in this one, considering the last one was black and white, the color like shows more positive, and his clothes are like cleaner and newer, and he's holding up the peace sign, so that like connotates good or well-being.
Okay, well said. Hey.
Like the image itself is like potent. It's very potent because it's a strong image demonstrating like his independence and individualism.
Can I ask you a question? Where do you see strength?
Well, I mean, the fact that he's behind like the barbed wire and he's like holding up a peace sign, it's kind of like you see strength like in him.
Okay. Can anyone build on this idea of strength? Yeah?
I would build on hers by saying, like, even though he might be in exile and he's like kind of like, it looks like he's kind of in a prison, he still has strength, like to show that like when you're in exile you can find like positives out of it.
Okay, very good. Jake?
The barbed wire in this image represents adversity. It represents almost oppression. And this kid, you know, reaching up high towards the top of the image, putting up a peace sign, represents him, you know, showing strength, you know, him working against the oppression being put on top of him.
Okay, who might, if we were to look at the context here, who might this peace sign be, who might he be extending this peace sign to?
The people in Syria that are still fighting.
The people in Syria who are still fighting. Okay, very good. An interesting gesture, trying to climb up out of the refugee camp, climb up out of the refugee camp to extend the peace sign.
So he's outside or inside?
He's inside. He's inside, but the idea is, you know, rising up. I mean, if you were to kind of go with what Jake was saying, it's almost as though he's rising up over the fences that, you know, divide him from his homeland. Does that make sense? Yeah.
This is just kind of like a guess, but would it also be a paradox because he's in a refugee camp, which is something negative, but the picture is also kind of positive because he looks clean and not happy, but he doesn't look depressed and sad.
Very good. Take us back to the word. What does the word mean?
Kind of like ironic, strange, not normal.
Okay, a contradictory statement, right? But that actually makes sense. Very good. Yeah, Hannah?
Could I relate this back to the essay?
Please.
The image shows the boy like rising above exile and the conditions of it, but in the essay, Edward says that exile cannot be surmounted, so this is contradicting him.
Okay, exile is a condition that cannot be surmounted, yet he seems to be trying to.
Would it be kind of contradictional because it's showing two different like views almost, kind of how there's like one way of saying that he is imprisoned or he's like behind the barbed wire of exile, but he's also having like views to the future and like being positive. So could you say that there's two different, not melodies, but like
points of view, perspectives?
Yeah, ideas.
Absolutely. One more, then we're going to transition. Go ahead.
Okay, to expand upon her idea, she was talking about how said that exile cannot be overcome. Well, you can see in the image, first, you know, to bring it back to the idea of power, the image, you know, the camera is from below the child, and, you know, when you see, you know, perspective from up, that represents power, but you can also see the barbed wire slightly above his hand, you know, meaning that he cannot get above the exile represented by that barbed wire and by the refugee camp. He can't quite get above it.
Okay, well said. All very good comments. Hannah brought up the essay. Let's transition to what we talked, or what you guys worked on last night, and move into how the essay is actually structured. We're going to work over on this board today. The question that I want to start with is this one. How is the evidence organized within the text? How is the evidence organized? What did you guys come up with? Remember now, the goal here is to take me back to the text as often as you can. And how is it organized? You can just start with the general statement, but then we'll move into specifics.
It's organized by the pros and cons of exile, like effects that exile can have on you, like the negatives that can happen because of exile, or the positive things you can take out of it.
Okay. Is there anyone that would disagree with this? That we essentially have two major arguments that play within the essay. One, stressing the negative qualities of exile. One, stressing the positive. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you now take me into the evidence itself? Can you summarize for me some of the very specific pieces of evidence he uses to illustrate the negative qualities? Is that clear what I'm asking? Can you summarize for me the evidence he provides us with? Go ahead, Paul.
So, for example, with the Amy Foster story, he shows an example of someone in exile or someone who's faced with the situation, and then he goes into showing how this is negative.
Can you give me some line numbers?
For 44, wait. Where's the supreme disaster of loneliness and despair. And that's talking about after Amy leaves him. He gets himself out of exile, and then he finds someone, and then she leaves him again, basically putting him back in exile. And that's showing the never-ending cycle of it, so that portrays the negative effects.
Okay, very good. Are we going to still work with Amy Foster?
Oh, no, I was going to say a positive effect.
Okay, let's do this, and I'm going to come to you first for the positive, okay? Justin?
I have another evidence for the negative.
Okay.
It's from line 25 or 24 to 26. It says exile is irremediably secular and unbearably historical. It is produced by human beings for other human beings, and that like death, but without death's ultimate mercy. It has torn millions of people from the nourishment of tradition, family, and geography.
Okay.
And so I think.
Can you summarize that? Can you paraphrase that? Put that into your own words.
But I think like his main thing was saying that it's like exile is almost worse than death because you feel so helpless, but you don't like in death. It's tough, but you eventually like get to rest and the struggle's over. But in exile, you feel like stuck between death and fighting for your life. So he's saying that exile is more of a struggle than even dying.
Okay. Good. Two examples. Can anyone build on Amy Foster? Anything else that you would say about Amy Foster in terms of how it illustrates the negative qualities of death? Go ahead, Lisa.
Well, in line 63, it says that it's a combination of crushing isolation and the world's indifference. So it like shows how like the individual is like alone in the world and like can't relate to anyone else.
Okay, very good. Yes, Vikram.
Adding on to that, in line 64, it says Yanko's fate is described as the supreme disaster of loneliness and despair. Okay. So that kind of adds on to like what his argument is about exile.
Okay, very good. Anna, one more, and then we're going to transition.
Line 67, he says, Yanko is dashing, light, and bright-eyed, where Amy is heavy, dull, and bovine. I think he's trying to say that, like, exile can happen to anyone, even if you're, like, a good person, showing that, like, he was bright-eyed and he was a good person, but exile still happened to him. Okay,
very good. Vocabulary terms that we would use to illustrate the negative effects of exile. What are some of them? What are some of the vocabulary terms? Yeah?
Dislocating.
Dislocating. Paige?
Alienation.
Alienating.
Estrangement.
Estrangement.
Yeah, ostracism.
Ostracism. Okay.
Yeah. Rift. Rift. Yeah.
Where would rift go?
Oh.
Who said that? How so?
Because regardless of whether you are impacted negatively or positively, there's still a rift between you and your home or you and the place you came from. And so that, I guess you could typically look at that with a negative connotation, but regardless of whether it's negative or positive, it's there.
Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Rift is, both of these conditions can tie to rift. Okay, yeah. Very good. Good use of the vocabulary terms. Do you want to take us to the positives?
Yeah, on line, I think it's 77, like 78. It says, James Joyce chose to be in exile to give force to his artistic vocation in an uncannily effective way. So it was effective, but like he still went through exile, but it had a positive effect on his art.
Okay. James Joyce's example of using exile to kind of fuel his art. Good. Other examples of the potential positives to come out of exile. Go ahead, Nicole.
The Adorno, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
The whole idea of you have to step outside of the norm, or the way of thinking that is you're stuck in your home, and that in order to step outside of that, you have to get out of your home. So they talked about the dogma and the orthodoxy, and he argues that to defy this, you have to leave your home.
Okay, to defy dogma or orthodoxy, one has to leave their home. Okay, very good. Yes.
On line 156 to 157, it says, seeing the entire world as a foreign land makes possible originality of vision.
Okay.
So it's showing like the different points of views that you can like finally understand exile.
Who said that? Was that in lines 134 to 140? No. Okay, so those are Sed's words. Okay, that's where he's explaining his point of view. Okay. If we were to go ahead and give adjectives or words to characterize the positives, what would they be? What are some possible positive effects? What's that?
Enriching.
What's that?
Enriching.
Enriching. Other ideas? Go ahead, Anna.
Independent.
Independent. Yes,
Potent.
Potent. Yeah, okay.
Contrapuntual.
Contrapuntual.
How is that arguing the positive?
Because wouldn't that be kind of...
Because aren't you
Isn't that a not good thing?
Well,
Contrapuntual?
It gives you a different outlook on life, in a way, you know? You're not, subjective to your, like, the one view that you were brought up with. You're not subjective to the dogma that was enforced upon you by your home, but moreover, you're able to expand your thought process to, see, the opposition, the other ideas.
But how does, I agree with that, but how does contrapuntual, however you say it, argue that?
Well, it's the idea that, you're able to see a broader range. You're able to view different opinions. It's almost like the idea of enlightenment. You're able to see more. You're more knowledgeable.
But couldn't the word could also be a negative way, because you could see two negative ways of life instead of two positive?
Well, it's two positives, but they're not harmonious. So.
But they're both melodies.
Isn't that not? Well. I just don't understand how it argues that exile is positive.
Because as you're going through a negative time, which is exile, you're seeing positive at the same time.
And that gets back to the idea of home. Do you recall that? The idea of leaving it behind that you were talking about yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay. If we were to go ahead and take into consideration both arguments, we're going to move on to what you guys worked. We've done the vocab. Now, what about the notion of paraphrasing his argument? What is his argument? What is the argument?
Sed's claim is that in today's world, exile is a terminal loss, but can just as easily be a positive impact on people because they finally see the true meaning of it.
Okay, say it to me one more. Can you give it to me one more time?
Sed's claim is that in today's world, exile is a terminal loss, but can just as easily be a positive impact on people because they finally see the true meaning of exile.
Exile is a terminal loss?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to catch up to you. And then what?
But can just as easily be a positive impact. On people because they finally see the true meaning of exile.
Positive impact?
Because they finally see the true meaning of exile.
It's a long one. It does work, yes, absolutely. If we were to boil this down to a very simple sentence, what would it be?
Exile is positive and negative.
Exile is positive and negative, right?
But that's so easy.
It is. But hold on, this is, okay. Exile is positive and negative. Now, let's just, if we were to look at the example here, between the two of these, there's a wide range, right?
Clear. Yeah.
Where can we get access to build something, a sentence like Julia's? Where can we go within the thought process that we've just engaged in to get to move towards Julia's idea? What do you think? Chin? Shoulder shrug?
Well, I guess.
How can we build on this simple statement and move towards something that, if we wanted to, something that's more complex like Julia's?
Well, I mean, I guess a proper interpretation of the text. Maybe some critical thinking.
Let me direct you towards something.
Yeah.
What about these?
Words with specific connotations.
Can we take? I mean, is that the difference here? Chin? The vocabulary that Julia used as opposed to the vocabulary that the sample? Yeah. Is this what separates the two? Yeah. We have a lot of terms. We have a lot of ideas that we've been working on with the essay. Going back and accessing these can be beneficial. Okay? Yeah. Now, let's consider what we need to do today. We need to take we need to take the essence of this and apply it to our pieces of literature. We need to synthesize. This is one of the components. Now, if we were to create a graphic organizer, we were to take into consideration everything that you just said, all the ideas that you've just given me. How can we begin the process of developing a graphic organizer that would represent what he does here? It represents Julia's sentence, the fact that we have the negative and the positive.
Well, you want to have two sides of it for each.
We'd want to have two sides. Good. So
kind of like a T-chart.
Like a T-chart. Okay. So if we were to look at this and we were to go ahead and put negative on one side, we talked about this, and positive on one side, we would put our text up above, Asher Lev, and we would apply the ideas that you came up with, the vocabulary terms that you came up with, to the text. So negative, you could use a very specific term. This becomes our argument, just like it was Sed's argument. Does that make sense to you? We could put estrangement here. Where inside of Asher Lev do we see estrangement? This becomes a body paragraph. Are you with me?
Yes.
Do you see how we're bringing the two together? Please.
In our final essay, do you want it to be like picking a side, or do you want us to show both sides?
We will probably be showing both sides, as Sed does.
But doesn't he have an underlying argument that's more than just exile's two sides?
I think it was just both sides.
Do you think that he's saying he's using the essay to show both sides, or he's using the essay to communicate something even more than that? Like, I feel like he's trying to communicate more that exile is seen as negative because people don't really understand it, because people don't know how to associate the idea of exile, because a lot of people some see it, there are positives, there are negatives, which makes it ambiguous, and because of that, people associate the idea of being ambiguous with a negative connotation, and that is why people see it as positive. I feel like there's more to it than just.
I think you're right. If we were to look at one aspect, if we were to look at Julia's statement, what side of the statement or what aspect of her statement is the most arguable? Where does the argument lie?
A positive impact can impact because they finally see the true meaning of exile.
Or life, or something along those lines, or a truer perspective on life. If we were to go ahead and look at those, if we were to look at those refugee images again, most people would argue that exile is a terrible thing, as he does in most of his essay. So I think the strongest, the most controversial part of his argument is the second half. Okay? If we were to consider this, what we're going to do is we're going to take the text that we're studying here in about a minute, and we're going to look for evidence and explanation of how we see these vocabulary terms, these terms, in the text. Potency, independence, and so forth, strength, estrangement, isolation, and so forth. Now you're going to have to provide me with evidence, and we have a limited amount of time. This is going to parallel the final exam. So as you're engaging in this experience, you want to think of this in terms of, you know, that anxiety that you produce, that's produced by the time frame. You know, it's kind of a preview of making sure we have textual support or evidence isolated, that type of thing. Now, let me ask one quick question. When we consider our evidence, what forms can our evidence take?
Quote.
Okay, very good. Direct citations.
Paraphrases.
Okay, paraphrase.
Inferences?
Well, they would all be inferences, probably. Direct citations. They would all require. I mean, there's inferencing going on throughout each one of these. What would be the most general?
A summary.
A summary.
I thought you're not supposed to do a summary.
Summary and paraphrase are not the same thing. Who can remind me of the definition? What distinguishes between the two, summary versus paraphrase? Justin?
I think plot summary is kind of more general. You're just like generalizing, you're summarizing what happened over a longer time, whereas paraphrasing is just kind of taking the author's words and trying to make it like say what you want to say.
Within a couple of words, a paraphrase is, here's the author's words, my statement is almost the same line.
Yeah.
Within a couple of words of the original text. A summary, you could have multiple paragraphs. You can boil it down to one sentence.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Your textual support will come in the form of one of these three. Direct citations is our goal. Okay? Questions? You're in your groups. You have the text that you're responsible for. Fahrenheit 451, Asher Lev, Fahrenheit, Of Mice and Men. Asher, Of Mice and Men, thank you. And the Odyssey. I want one person to come up. Your piece of paper that I'm about to hand you is going to take this form, a T-chart. There are black pens up here that you are going to use to create your T-chart. And I'll be around to help you guys out in the thought process. Send one member from each group up to grab the pens, then come see me for the paper.
Tireless tribute. I vote Vikram since you're trying to blame it on him. What?
You guys have these papers? Justin, you have these papers?
Yeah, you can move the mic, right?
If you want to use the board with magnets?
Yeah,
how about
we call it board.
Where's the mice and men? Are we students? Are you a mice and men? Yeah. Okay, let's talk real quick. More real. Let's combine and talk about the text real quick. All right, so now, you probably had the most difficult.
Yeah, I'm gonna trade for Fahrenheit.
What's that?
I'm gonna trade for
Well,
Fahrenheit.
if we were to consider the positive effects, well, what are the negative effects of exile in the novel?
They're lonely. Loneliest guys in the world. No family, no place. They belong.
They don't belong anywhere. They're poor. They all they have is each other, right?
Yeah.
What else?
Nobody understands Lenny, really.
No one understands Lenny. It's almost as though they speak a different language. Who are these guys? You know, you have to admit that it's kind of strange, the characters say. So if that's kind of the majority of the text, where do we? This is the difficult part. Where do we find? Where would we go to look for positive effects? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
They're more independent. They're stronger as
Can anyone build on the idea of strength within the characters through that exile?
like they become used to fending for each other and just living out the wilderness. They're able to kind of survive anywhere.
Okay, I like that idea. You can go ahead.
Oh no, mine doesn't matter.
What's that?
It's good. It's good.
Okay. Can you go find text for these ideas? No?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the goal. All right, see what you can do. If you have questions, I'll be back around.
Okay. Thank you.
Come on. There you go.
Oh,
slide this so we have more room?
Can we use more like evidence from like the essay, just because it's like easier?
And this I don't think you need to, but you will. You can do that for your final exam. But let's talk in general terms: negative versus positive. Where do we see? Where are you going to go seek in the text?
Well, positive is towards the end once he becomes successful with his art, and
I
after
think
he like
even
breaks.
before that one, he's with Jacob Kahn, and he's already exiled somewhat from his family, but he's joining the group of artists.
But isn't that like, I think that's like his darkest time because he's torn between Jacob Kahn and art, and then his family and religion. So
does he ever get over? Does he ever surmount that?
No.
Does he ever get over that?
no, it's just because his family disowns him at the end.
One of the positives probably when he's in Paris and he like finds home there, so like he's.
What is he able to do in Paris?
He makes new roots.
He makes new roots. I like what you're saying. There's a term from Edward Said's essay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's use that.
So negative is one more time.
Negative.
Being exiled from his religion.
Cut off from his religion. Cut off from his family.
Do we have to like
community.
write, or can I just like write that?
We have to write.
Well,
like,
you want
direct-
evidence as best you can.
like a direct quote.
Direct quotes are the best. If time constraints, prevent you from doing so, I would start with direct quotes and then move towards summary if that's what it requires.
What about this? It says, after you left, the Rebbe said softly, "You have crossed a boundary. I cannot help you. You are alone now. I give you my blessing."
Yeah.
What do you have for?
So you could just say, "You have crossed the boundary. I cannot help you. You are alone now. I give you my blessing."
Also a negative.
He wants to see everything now, which means he's comfortable and he's accepted like the world, and he doesn't always want to be at home. And then when he says, when he talks about Mildred and he can let go of Mildred dying and he doesn't feel like super sad about it, and also when when he says you are the book of Ecclesiastes, and then he says his quote, it shows that he's like found himself and his identity through exile because he has no home but he still found himself.
Okay, through the text that he's carrying with him. Very good. Negative. Where's the negative component of exile here within the novel? Where are you going to go look for evidence there?
In the beginning.
In the beginning?
Yeah, because we talked about his home being a mausoleum and how he wasn't happy.
It's all right to paraphrase.
Now, does that make you remember that?
Because he wasn't here yesterday.
I know. Do you remember earlier on in the story? What's another when he first meets Clarice, Lauren?
Yes.
Where do we see her effect on him? What's the negative effect of exile initially?
You can put a quote right under here.
What does she do to him?
Makes him not feel happy.
Makes him not feel happy. Another effect?
He feels like denial.
Goes through denial.
So should we write what this
He does
means?
go through denial. What's that?
So should I write what this means, or just
Absolutely explain
Bring
it.
Clarice up in the side.
I mean, what does she run off with?
his heart?
No.
His happiness?
It specifically says, do you remember?
His face mask.
His mask, right? His happy mask. The mask of happiness.
Yeah.
What happens at that point?
He realizes that he's not happy.
Okay, good.
Damn. Wings, he wonders why.
What are you guys pulling for negative?
Like the sacrifices. Like when he had to burn down his own home, and then he saw Mildred like running away, and then like how he had to like be lost alone in the woods.
Okay, very good. What about positives?
I was thinking like when he was in the river, like he started to have like new perspectives of life and like understand that.
Any other? Okay, very good. Absolutely. So we talked about that. Well, so what else is happening in the river? New perspectives on life. He's got the leisure.
The other teachers, the other people he finds,
the runaways.
the runaways. They help him reach self-actualization, right? Like find what he's worth and what.
Where do we see evidence of that? Can you summarize for me what happens? Like, where do we see? 107.
They tell him that he's a part of their society, I guess, their own society, because he's read that book and now he's part of it.
Do you remember this, Jay?
Yes.
Do you remember what position does he take within that group that?
Well, he takes
talking about.
He takes up the position. He remembers. It's it's either the Holy Bible or it's
Ecclesiastes.
Yes, yeah, the Ecclesiastes.
But I guess my question is this: what role does he take within that group?
Like he fits in, because like in society he didn't fit in, but now like since he's with a group of like men, like that understand him, like he finally fits in.
I agree with exactly what you're saying. If we were to look for a specific piece of evidence, what does he do at the end of the novel in relationship to the group?
He leads the group.
Yes.
Yes, very good. He leads the group. Okay, and that may tie into a piece of evidence for self-actualization. He becomes a leader of sorts.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Good. Nice job.
Okay, so on positive, reached self-actualization, and we got a quote for that. Under it, put a bullet point or a dash that says, leads the group.
Lenny has no morals, like that's kind of negative thought. All he knows is like,
I'm fine because he feels estranged. I guess.
Where do you see the estrangement?
Like he feels alone. His own art gleaming, set apart. I mean, if you had put that in the quote, it would have showed estrangement.
So would you modify your quote?
I would. I think now that I look at it, I think I would modify it and put in who sat apart. Sat apart because that shows that he's not with anyone. He's just by himself.
Do you guys agree with that? Do you agree with that the sat apart would help maybe build a better piece of evidence?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Where are you thinking you might go for the positives?
Positive, I think. I mean, he went out for war, happy and joy. I'm gonna beat the Trojans, and then while he's in exile for 20 years, he actually figures out, I miss my home so much. He figures out the value of his home.
So he uses it as motivation.
Okay. Uses his home as a form of motivation. Uses the exile as a form of motivation to get home.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right, good. Well done.
Okay, so do we want to add the set apart?
Yeah, put sat apart. Just like
under it, it's fine.
Just like cross out the first and then put sat apart.
Just add like maybe just like right here and just like add the words.
Hold on, where are the commas at?
Oh, after O and Quinn.
Now, because he's
She said to me once.
Yeah. Comma.
you can see that he's also.
And then, so we can skip use this sentence, just like put a dash mark.
I mean ellipses?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. And then write, oh, I like this one, Asher. I like this one. This one. Comma after O and 1. This one. Comma. Asher. You made the snow very pretty and so high.
Okay, I found another one. It's kind of like a leap.
Dom, will you look for when he's in Paris and he paints a crucifixion?
Yeah,
very pretty and
pretty. You made the snow very pretty and so high.
Is there a comma?
No, very pretty, period, and then
and so high.
And so high, period.
We're going to try to get as far as we can. We'll finish this on Monday, but listen. As we start to shift to the second column, some of you are already into the second column. We have about 5 minutes left. If you have to shift in the summary, that's acceptable. We can go ahead and on Monday we can finish the evidence portion.
Are we gonna present or no?
We will present. We'll present on Monday.
Okay.
So he's
about 5 more minutes.
a mindset of statism. Write that down. Yeah.
Did you look it up?
No, it's in the book. How do you spell mausoleum?
I just got
Page 9.
I know, but my book.
How do you spell what?
Alright, Anna, I got it.
Okay. Positive though, it's positive
It's like
because it's a dark drawing, but he finds himself. So like he understands himself. So would that be positive? Because like
I mean, yeah, I guess.
What do you guys think? Ask your group members. What do you think?
group members.
I think it would.
Okay.
Why?
Because, I mean, just the fact that he's finding himself is a pretty good thing. Like, even if it's in a bad way, it's still... Because you find yourself in your darkest times, and it's in a dark.
Do you agree with that?
It's counterpunctual, too, because it's a dark drawing, but it's a good thing that he's finding himself.
What is it,
Or a paradox.
Paradox. Okay. Very good.
All right. What was the quote?
Wait, so
I
right
found
here you can
myself
write,
in front of a drawing.
so you remember on Monday we can write appreciation, like just put a dash in there, appreciation. So we know what to talk about when we
Yeah, I will.
Alright.
I found myself in front of a drawing.
Like when drawing in on her and he's imaging her dad.
With black and red swirls.
Is there any
No.
back, or like they just kind of wander from ranch to
Nothing's
ranch?
rooting them, so they can choose where they root down.
This is positive? What do you think?
To all places.
Well, I don't know. This is the hardest part, right? Where do you think there's positive within of mice and men? Migrant workers, estranged from home, not having a home, having to bounce from place to place. There's not a lot. I mean, what would be the one positive quality that comes out of it?
Dreaming.
The dream, okay. What do the other migrants say to George and Lenny?
Yeah.
They're rare. They're strange, right?
They have understanding.
They don't understand. They have
Yes.
Elaborate. Who has understanding? Who understands one another?
Lenny and George, they have a relationship in that they can validate each other's existence because they understand each other.
Well said. That's what I would be looking for. That would be that strengthen your evidence. Did you hear what he said? They validate each other's existence. Okay, that's good. Now where are you going to find support for that?
Where they say like that they have each other.
Very good. Where's that at?
It's whenever he talks about the dream house.
Very good, because I've got you and you got me to look after one of them. Okay, very good. Okay, that I think that might be a better piece of evidence than where you're currently heading.
Okay. Validate.
How did the positive turn out? One more minute. Wrap up the idea you're on. We'll finish on Monday. One more minute.
Pretty much included, like, sort of in the beginning when they said, like, that they have each other to look after.
Okay, that's what this group just, okay, good. That's where this group just is working on right now. Can you offer me the explanations? Maybe one explanation before we turn this in?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get that
So
done.
do you want to just elaborate on that right here?
That'd be fine.
All right. Alright, so this exile has caused them to become more independent and they're able to just together. Yeah. That sounds like a contradicting sentence. Let's say independent from society. More independent. Because if you say more independent, then it's like they're alone, but they're together. They're able to just survive on each other.
So bring your charts up, your cheat charts. Put your name on the back, that's fine. Just put one person's name on it, that's fine. It's all. That's perfect, man. No, we'll pick up on that Monday. Thank you. Everyone back to your seats. Pick up the 3x5 note card on your desk. 3x5 note card.
Here.
451 and a half, huh? They should be in the center.
I'm hungry and tired. You know how long did you stay at school today?
Does everybody have a 3x5?
Wait, how long
Those little
do you
guys?
Oh, just kidding.
How long are you staying?
I'm going home today. Friday for there. All right. I get to go home, but I'm going to Yeah, I'm going to Saturday. Oh my god, it's Friday! But it's not a 4-day weekend. I want a 4-day weekend. Can we have a 4-day weekend every weekend?
Are we ready? All right, before you leave today, I'm going to ask that you, okay, we've just essentially engaged in the thought process necessary to find success on the final. We have one more novel to read with Lord of the Flies. So as we read Lord of the Flies, we want to be aware of where we're headed. You know, we don't have a lot of time before the final exam. So as we move into the text, we have an idea of bringing text together. We want to synthesize, right? We want to find those common threads that bring text together. So what I'd like you to do on this note card is just, having gone through the experience, I want you to explain how you will synthesize SED's essay with the literature we have studied. What thought process do you have to continue to go through? What activities do you have to do in order to find success and bring all these pieces of literature together? Does that make sense? You're just reflecting on what you did today, maybe elaborating on it. You've done it. I mean, I would start with this, right? The reasoning that's behind this. Okay? So again, what do you need to do to synthesize the text? There's about 2 minutes left. On the way out the door, you put your exit slip on the bookcase.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. You will put your name on it, yes. And we've already touched on the homework. It's over here. We should be good on that, though. Go ahead, make sure that you write to the bell. I want to see what you have to say. Any clarifications? Okay. Makes sense?
He's not here today.
Thank God.
I know, I saw that.
Yeah, I think it's really.
No.
I didn't know good things.
Mr. Guzaldo, you made him subconscious.
20 minutes ago.
I talked to him afterwards.
Wait, you knew he was going to be here?
Yeah.
What?
I know these things.
Oh, what did you
You're done?
I said, yes, do I hear?
Get to work. Get to work.
I said, I'll synthesize it, the literature, by looking for negatives of exile from the essay and then paralleling it to negatives, examples of negatives from the book of exile, like the negative effects.
The negative effects. What about the positives?
I said the same.
Okay, the same.
I always had an E. I don't know why.
To what?
To 4.
Why?
We have 1 more minute.
Oh, jeez.
I did really good last night.
Did you read?
Yeah, no, not that, but when we were doing the 18 to 21, I wasn't even like that confused.
I was.
even that confused.
I texted Anna for help.
As this slips up here, have a great weekend.
And
Good luck in class. Enjoy it.